Hi everybody, my name is Anika Scott and I am a debut author, one of the many of us who are unfortunate enough to be debuting during the quarantine lockdown corona phase happening all over the world right now. I'm actually sitting here in Germany where I've lived for about 20 years and we have been in lockdown for 3 weeks. And I haven't lost my mind yet, so that's really good. And I wanted to tell you a little bit about my debut novel. It's called Finding Clara in the UK. That's right here. It came out about a month ago. And in the United States, it's called The German Heiress. And The German Heiress comes out April 7th. Yeah, I wanted to tell you a little bit about the book first, and then I'll talk about how I did it, or a little bit about how I did it. The German Heiress is a historical novel set in Germany in 1946. It's about a German woman who was an industrialist's daughter who worked in her family's iron works during World War II. Businesses and industries cooperated with Hitler a lot in World War II, especially those in the arms industry. So Clara, the star of the book, was complicit in building weapons for the Nazis, basically. So after World War II, she's in hiding because the Allies arrested the industrialists and put them on trial in Nuremberg. Her father is sitting in Nuremberg waiting for his trial, and Clara has been avoiding being arrested because she doesn't want to join them. She was actually quite anti-Nazi, but went along with what her family had done during the war, so she feels very conflicted about her own past. When her friend goes missing, or when she finds out her friend has been missing since World War II, Clara comes out of hiding, and that puts her in the crosshairs of a British officer who's been hunting her. During her search, she comes across a charming black marketeer named Jacob, who is also looking for her friend. And a teenage boy named Willie, who lives in an abandoned coal mine underneath the city of Essen, where the book is set. And Willie refuses to believe that the war has been lost. So all of these three stories are woven together in The German Heiress, or Finding Clara, depending on where you are in the world. And I have had an amazing time writing it and getting it published, so I wanted to talk a little bit to other writers, about how it happened. I worked on the book that became, I'll just say German Heiress for now, the book that became The German Heiress. I worked on that for about 4 years before I tried to get an agent. And people always ask, how do you know when a book is ready? Because this is not the first book I ever wrote, but it's the first book that I tried to get an agent with. And the answer for me, when was it time to just submit the book, was I knew I couldn't go any further by myself. I needed a professional to come in and tell me what the book still needed. And obviously you can go in two directions. You can just submit, or you can pay for an editorial, some sort of editorial critique. Or if you have friends who are further along in the publishing journey than you, maybe they would be willing to critique your manuscript as well. I didn't know anybody really who could critique for me at the level that I wanted, and I didn't have the money basically to pay for an independent editor for like a developmental edit, the sort of thing the book needed. So yeah, I did probably a silly thing in general, which is I just said, all right, I'm submitting. Um, and I was one of the extremely lucky people who found the right person very fast. I really think it's often luck. I had put together a list of agents and sort of ranked them, and was advised to submit in groups of 5, which is what I did. And I had, 3 requests for the full manuscript in the first 5. So once I had that, I mean, I knew, okay, there's probably something right about the concept of my book. And I was fortunate enough that one of the agents in my top 5 offered representation, and it was amazing. She is still my agent, of course, and she is an amazing editor in her own right. And she basically took me through what the manuscript needed in order to bring it to sort of an optimal story, not only a story that respected my vision, but one that was optimal for the market. And I think some people might confuse if something is marketable, or if I change a book for the market, that means it's not mine anymore. That's not true. There's this sort of middle ground that you can compromise about, and there are certain things where I will not compromise, and that's fine. But the core things, the things that make the story really important, those things absolutely must be kept. But it's good to be very flexible and just listen to critique and say, all right, what can I do to help this book along? So I had thought, when I got an agent so fast, I'm all set. This is going to be easy. Publishing is not easy. It took about 3 years, a little more than 3 years, to edit with my agent. There was, maternity leave and other things, family stuff going on in there. So I didn't, work on the book every single day. But it really took multiple drafts for me to chip away at this book and really learn how to distill it down to the most powerful story. And really what she helped me do was find the story that was already in the book. And my agent was someone who saw that in the draft that I had submitted to her. She saw what was in there, and she saw the potential, and she said, all right, we're going to work and get it there. And it took a long time. And I will not lie, there were moments where I thought, I'm never going to get this book right. But I stuck with it. And the reward came when we finally went on submission. And yeah, I think all told, I was on submission for 13 days. It was so fast that interest came in the UK, in the United States, in other countries as well. The book went to auction, and I thought, what is going on? I'm being hit by a freight train. What is this? So the book sold. It sold well, and I'm still, I think back at that time, and I'm so grateful to have had that experience of this excitement, bubbling around my book. There's just nothing like it. And it's nice to be paid for the work that I put in, even though nobody can really pay for all the years that it took for me to write this book, but it's still, the deal went a long way to helping me realize the value of the writing I had done. So I was signed, or I did sign, with 2 amazing publishers, one in the UK, an imprint of Penguin Random House. The one in the United States is an imprint of HarperCollins. Dream come true, right? first book debut and signing with big imprints. After that, the editing phase was relatively easy to me because I had edited so hard and so long with my agent. My editors in the UK and the United States worked together to edit my manuscript. They sent me a combined editorial letter. It was about 10 pages long, single-spaced. So, I went, when I saw it. But once I sat down and looked through it, there were just great ideas to clarify various things within the story. So, to me, I had no problem being on board, jumping in and rewriting the book or revising it a little bit for the editors. The most challenging thing was that it had to be done in something like 6 weeks. And after working on the book a total of like 8 years, the thought that I had to do a revision for the publishers in 6 weeks was just but I did it. So the process of not only writing the book but getting the book ready for submission, and then all the way through the phases of editing at a publishing house. This is just years and years and years of work. But the good thing is if you learn how to revise really, really deeply and robustly, if you learn how to do that early on, then that's a skill set that you have, and you can take that forward. So that, like, when I was revising for the publishers, I felt very confident that I could do it because I had revised so much already for my agent, and she has a good eye, and she did not let me off the hook, if there's something that needed to be looked at. So I think that's something that is good to know about the industry if you haven't signed with an agent or a publisher yet. That there is a learning curve. I think a lot of people think the book has to be perfect with a capital P before an agent will look at it, or before a publisher will look at it. And I think all of us have a different idea of what perfect is. I think nothing is ever perfect that I write. So if I maintained that attitude, I would have never submitted and never gotten a book deal. The book will never be perfect. That's the thing you have to get into your head. Never, never, never will it be perfect. So a trick that you have to learn as a writer, I feel anyway, is you have to fool yourself a little bit into working on something that will never 100% satisfy you. And it's a personal decision when you feel it's good enough, and that good enough really, really is good enough, at least for now. That's how I go into every draft now. I tend to write multiple drafts. I'm just like that. I have to feel my way into the story. I have to find out what the characters really want and who they are. So when I go through a draft, I know if it's an early draft, when I get to the end or when I'm writing a scene, I'm like, okay, it's good enough, and I'll move on. And I know later I can fix it. And later I have to come back and fix it, and maybe in that round I have to fix it a bit, but I know, this isn't perfect either, but it's good enough for now. I'll come back later, and then I circle back around. I think it's just a trick of the mind, really, to make the critique chatter, the editorial chatter that might be in the back of your mind. You got to make that go away. That's not really helpful when you're drafting, or even when you're revising. Because to me, when I revise, if I'm taking a scene and rewriting it because I know there's something wrong with it, I kind of know, okay, here are the couple of things that I think need to be fixed in the scene. I might write that down or jot it down, and then I put it away, and then I sit and rewrite the scene as if it was the first time I write it. but it always comes out better because in the back of your mind, you know what you have to do, and that sort of negative voice, critique voice is not there. So I call my critique voice Madame Perfectionniste. I don't know if that's the right way to pronounce it in French, but this Madame Perfectionniste is a very important person in my brain, because a perfectionist just wants to get it right, and that's a really noble thing. So we can acknowledge the perfectionism in us and say, this is a great thing. You want to get it right. This is good. But the moment that this perfectionism starts to make you, stiff and not be able to work, that's when you have to step away and say, all right, Madame, we're gonna go talk to you later. Right now I'm writing. And it's hard to do. It's like putting on a different hat while you're writing, the critique hat versus the author hat or the writer hat. But for me anyway, it's extremely important to do that, because I am a perfectionist. I am somebody who says, all right, it's gotta be right. It's gotta be right. It's not gonna be as right as I'd like it to be. So that's kind of a trick of mine. Yeah, I think I've talked a lot about perseverance already. What made me stick with my books. I feel like it was something I can't really describe. You just know when you're writing something that sustains you somehow. I'm somebody who kind of gets bored easily, so I'm definitely going to always think of stories that just entertain me, and they entertain me over and over again because I'm going to have to read it 1,000 times. There's nothing really that I can say how to know, is this going to be the idea that stays with me? I don't know. I think that's why it's good to have 2 or 3 ideas cooking at the same time. And then there's going to be an idea that you kind of always go back to and grab and say, what's that? What's that? And it might sort of stew in your brain for years before it bubbles up, and then you realize that's the one I'm going to stick with. I had some really difficult phases, of course, during the early time editing the book, before I submitted to an agent, and also afterwards. There were just phases where I'm like, I hate this book, I'll never get it right. Why am I doing this to myself? Maybe I should just start something else. All of these are normal feelings and normal thoughts. So the first thing is, don't worry about having those kinds of feelings and thoughts. That's what everybody has. I have it on my second book too, even though I've gone through this whole experience and I have this wonderful debut novel, but it's the same feeling for the next book. So you persevere just by knowing, or you go through these worse phases where you feel tired or just empty. I think the best thing to do is to step away from the work. I think maybe 3 or 4 months before my agent submitted my debut novel to publishers, I had written in a notebook, because I keep a writer's journal, I give myself permission to just give up on this novel. And I just wrote it down like that. I give myself permission to abandon this novel. And I wrote it down, shut the book, went away. And the next day when I opened my notebook, I'm like, no, I can't possibly abandon this novel. So it was a liberating thing to just let myself have the idea, all right, we're done. I walk away from this book. It only lasted a day, but it still, it did liberate me, and it made me be able to sit down and do the last edit, which was, the one that we submitted to publishers very successfully. So, yeah, I think I've talked a really long time. And if you've been listening this long, great, thank you. I'll just sign off again that German Heiress, that's my American book. Historical, suspense, really fun, pacey, and you learn a lot about what Germany was like after World War II. And if you're in the UK or some other places around the world, it'll look like this, Finding Clara. And gorgeous cover, and you'll find out what the bird is all about as well if you read it. Thanks for listening, and I hope you all stay safe and, try to fill your creative wells however you can. Read books, read poetry, write poetry, try something new. Don't feel the need to be as productive as you normally would be. I know I'm not. You will find your place again where you can work. You will. Don't worry about it. You will. So thanks for listening. Bye-bye.